And that's true because many of the systems that are still around and embedded in American culture were built during a time where racism was legal and intentional. So it absolutely shaped how they were designed and what those systems were meant to do. Now, in the video that this comment was left on, I already broke down how tipping in America is linked to slavery, but there are definitely more examples. And policing is one of the clearest examples of this. So in the South, early forms of organized policing actually came from slave patrols, which were groups of people whose job it was to capture escaped enslaved people and monitor Black populations and control their movement, right? Like that was the function. So from the very beginning, policing in those regions was specifically about surveillance of a targeted group. And even as the system evolved, right, that foundation didn't just disappear because it influenced laws and enforcement patterns, and it ultimately defined who was seen as suspicious and or in need of being controlled. Then you have the GI Bill. Now, this wasn't created to be racist on paper technically, but it was implemented through systems that already were. And I think you could say that that was intentional. But things like, banks or the colleges and state agencies, they were the ones given control of how those benefits were distributed. And those were the same institutions that were enforcing segregation and redlining at the time. So while the law was technically race neutral on paper, in practice, Black veterans were denied home loans, they were blocked from universities, as they were often pushed into underfunded alternatives, which means that one of the largest wealth building opportunities in US history was distributed unevenly from the very start. So while white veterans built wealth through homeownership and education, many Black veterans were locked out of those same opportunities. So this bill is one of the biggest contributors to the racial wealth gap that we still see today. Another big one are the highways and urban planning, right? Here we saw entire Black neighborhoods that were completely demolished in order to build interstate systems. And this action intentionally separated and displaced these communities. And to be clear, these routes were not random, right? They were deliberately placed through areas with the least political power to resist or push back. So infrastructure became a tool of segregation, ultimately carving racial lines into the physical landscape and thus reinforcing inequality for generations. What looked like development was really a way to cut communities off from resources, opportunities, and each other, right? And at the same time, you have redlining, which made sure that those very same communities couldn't access loans or rebuild elsewhere, essentially trapping people in under-resourced areas. And that kind of disruption shapes wealth and it shapes access and mobility for generations. Now, those are just 3 examples, right? I mean, I could really continue if you want me to, you just let me know. But I'm just trying to demonstrate how if a system was built in an unequal society, then it usually carries that inequality forward. And that's not my opinion, right? That's how systems work. And just so there's no confusion, it's not that systems don't evolve over time, right? It's that the original purpose of them still echoes in how they operate today. And if you don't understand the foundation, then the current outcomes will always look random instead of patterned. But most Black Americans, we know because we've never had the privilege of not knowing.